Good evening. I'd like to call to order the March 8th, 2021 work session of the York County School Board. We are now counting down until the first day of spring, believe it or not, which is only 12 days away on March 20th. We've been very fortunate with our weather conditions being so mild, especially considering what other areas around the country have experienced. Once again, we want to extend appreciation to our families, staff, students, and teachers for their cooperation and flexibility as we move forward in our reopening process. Just a reminder about our mask. I'd like to call to order the March 8th, 2021 work session of the York County School Board. We are now counting down until the first day of spring, believe it or not, which is only 12 days away on March 20th.
Let's pause for just a second.
He's a man ahead of his time.
Yeah. That's our YouTube delay.
Yeah,
Slightly distracting.
a little bit. Okay. A reminder about the mask mandate. Per the governor's orders, individuals must remain masked when indoors and within the presence of others. However, the mask mandate includes the provision to remove masks when communicating with individuals who may be hard of hearing. To ensure that our closed captioning is able to accurately capture our presenters' comments, some staff may remove their masks at the podium as we have the additional barrier in place. We have several presentations this evening, the first one being a reopening update. So Dr. Shandor, would you please share some more information?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. We're going to ask Dr. Carroll to come to the podium. I think as has been our custom for the past several months, he has provided a number of reopening updates, and he's going to share some information with you this evening. Dr. Carroll?
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Chairman Higginbotham, members of the board, yes, I'm here again to give you another update on our progress. So, as you know, these last 3 weeks have been big for us. We were able to maintain our operational integrity as we went through the last 3 weeks as we thought we could, and in fact, we were having conditions improve each of the 3 weeks as we returned 7th, 9th, and 11th graders, and then today we can celebrate that 8th and 10 have joined us, and so now we have all grades in hybrid. We also started YRA today in a 4-day configuration back to the school, so that's the first school we've been able to return all 4 out of 5 days. Some of this will seem like the same report with just slight variations. So I want to revisit our local health metrics, and here you see some of our workers getting second doses. We have now reached 97% of those employees that indicated that they wanted the vaccination. 97% of them have received their second dose. So we are well along and now trying to clean up some loose ends as we move on in the next couple of weeks. But as I've said in previous reports, this allows us to focus solely on York County metrics because now it's just the students that we're concerned about that can mostly bring things into the division. And so, as we talk about health metrics, another important thing to note is that the metrics have changed again, have been revised. And I mentioned revision to the CDC metrics last month, and we expect that there's going to be some changes with VDH in very short order. And so a couple of meetings ago, I shared that with you, and VDH has yet to revise that guidance, but they did change the format in which they're reporting out on their state site, and it looks more like this, and this does reflect the CDC configuration having 4 categories of transmission in schools as opposed to 5. You'll remember we started with 4, then we went to 5, now we're back to 4 again, but with different levels. Also, this is going to be using a 7-day format, not a 14-day format. Now the problem is that we don't have any new VDH data since February 27th, and you see that cited here on the screen because that's the latest date as they roll over, this is what we're seeing. And we've gotten no explanation whether this is going to be, returned to a daily report or it's going to be a once-a-week report. We just haven't heard anything. The last data that we had is from March 4th, last Thursday. So it talked about, but they reported, this was from the Peninsula Health District, reported out on a 14-day, where we were at 268 cases per 100,000. However, positivity rate for the first time had dropped under 10%, was at 8.63. But as of that date, we don't know where we stand today as far as case burden. Now, it's important to note that these things will look different. Your case burden, which you see here on the slide, says 151.8. That was a total of cases in a 7-day period. We were getting it in a 14. So you're going to see a difference between this 151 and, let's say, the 268 that I just talked about on March 4th. So because you're talking about totals. And so you are going to see the numbers reduce drastically, but that's based on the 7-day measurement, not any drastic change in the case rate. And so, but the positivity rates will stay the same because that's just the positivity rate of what the tests that are being taken. I want to revisit our internal dashboard. We are starting to see a plateau there. You'll remember that we had some very high numbers here in the active positive cases in the month of January. Those have fallen a great deal, but now we've kind of plateaued right about that area, mid-November, right before Thanksgiving, where we were in the high single digits or double digits, 10, 11, 12 cases. Right now, with those 10 active cases, we have 62 active quarantines. That's not extremely high, but it is high compared to the 10 active rates of cases. But I am pleased to announce, in the month of February, we had 0 documented transmissions in the building. We have continue to have some problems in athletics, but those are a little bit hard to entangle with high school kids and their patterns of interaction. Was it actually the being in the sports or something that surrounds that? But in the academic building, 0 transmissions. So we are still at 6 documented transmissions since September 28th. And we had one partial grade that went, a cohort that went to virtual learning, and they come off of that on Thursday, so we will then be cycled out again as far as a closure of a grade or a cohort. So let's talk about next steps, because I know that's what everybody is interested in. Our goal remains that we want to expand on in-person learning, and we've been working diligently in that direction, and YRA was another step in that direction. We know that things like the full staff vaccination protects the most vulnerable among us. We have a demonstrated success in our mitigation strategies, and we know that community transmission up until late last week, we don't know about the last few days, but until late last week had been continuing to fall. And all of the last 3 bullets lead us closer to our goal. We do have some obstacles that remain, but we don't think that these are anything that we can't overcome. First of all, we're waiting for that revised VDH guidance that we hope is going to come in the next few days. We do want to see that we are still in alignment with the things that they are recommending. Also, our operational integrity focus is going to shift. We now know that we can have all of our teachers covered with the substitute fill rate. That's something that shouldn't change because just the number of students shouldn't change that. That's really dependent on the number of teachers in sections. Where we start to have concern now is transportation and food service staffing. As of early last week, our food service was only staffed at 54%, so that does limit our ability to provide food in school. Now, we did have some movement late last week where They've got a new recruiter, and they've hired, I think, 4 new just last week. So we are starting to see some movement there, and so we continue to monitor that. And you know that we outsourced to Sodexo, so they are completely in control of that process. The other thing is transportation. As more and more students return, can we safely transport? And you'll remember at the beginning of the year, that was the one area where we couldn't make any guarantees to be able to space people out enough to keep them safe. So we asked our parents to fill that void and to transport their children and to carpool with the same pod of students. And we're going to need to renew that request because the traffic at some of the schools is starting to get burdensome now that all grades are in. So we're going to need to renew that request, and there'll need to be an extra emphasis on the carpooling request. We also, now that we're starting to get into warm weather, they'll be able to open the windows on the buses, which will increase the air movement, which also adds a layer of protection. Also, to go any farther, we're going to have to forego the 6-foot social distance strategy, which has worked for us. So that will require strict adherence to other strategies, especially masking, which the science is increasingly moving to that being the most important of the strategies to mitigate. And that will also result in some increased student quarantines because we will have more students closer together. So that's just something that we need to keep in mind as we move forward. So as we move forward, we are currently in the planning stages for the flexible framework to move towards a traditional format, which we placed in the plan last July. The goal is to have a plan or the start of a progression communicated to the public by the March 22nd board meeting at the latest. We feel that we can produce this. We're in the final stages now. We feel confident we can do it, and we hope that the plan will be communicated before that. But to help prepare that, we are instituting some attendance changes. Last week, we announced to secondary families that extra steps needed to be taken with attendance. Teachers now have the ability to actually denote whether a student isn't just only present either in person or virtually, but they actually have another button in the system that says physically present. And we felt that was important to know because we need to be able to know exactly how many students, especially in those those upper grades, how many are in the building, because that attendance has not been as much as we would have liked. But the students have been, and families have been communicated to that they must be in attendance to remain in the flexible framework, and we will be updating the roles in a couple of weeks for that purpose of knowing who's actually coming to school and who's choosing to stay at home, and that will inform our planning, especially in those secondary grades. And so that ends my report, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
I know the division has been very, very flexible with families, switching back and forth from virtual to flexible, but it's going to get to the point where you have to draw the line and say, we can no longer do that. Are we at that line right now where we are
Yes,
saying?
we're there. We have to have a stable format in order to make these decisions and how many are going to be there. And so we have reached that point. And then after we start to move people in, there will be the ability to come in, but it's going to be on a space availability only
Okay.
till the end of the year, because just some decisions just are where they're at. We can't go out and hire new people. We've had positions that have been open since December, so the market just isn't there. And some people have just been slotted to do certain things that just, it's too hard to move back and forth for us.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate the fact that you guys have been flexible this entire time, but I understand that you have to get to a point where you just can't keep waffling back and forth. If you go back to the core indicators that you guys are reporting on our website, would it be easier for the division to just not report that and just direct people to the VDH site if they wanted to see the metrics? It just seems like a lot of work for you to constantly be waiting for them to update you, get information, you're waiting, you've got people emailing and saying, where's the data? I'm just wondering if it would be easier on the folks that are updating that information to just take that off and say, if you want the data, here's the link to the VDH site or the Peninsula Health Department
Well, we
site.
get the information typically on Wednesdays.
Wednesday or Thursday, but it really isn't that much of a problem. And that's something, there's more to it than just what we're getting from VDH. Remember, we put the operational integrity metrics there. So we put a lot of stuff there, and I think, or data there, and I think that we've got our system down now where it's not that difficult to do. There's going to be changes, though, as I anticipate with the new VDH reporting status.
And this coming Tuesday, I had a meeting last week and with the state superintendent and a number of other superintendents, and he provided an update that Tuesday we should be receiving some updated information from VDH. So hopefully we'll get some of that, the next wave or change of guidance next Tuesday. So then we'll decipher everything in there and figure out how, what our next steps are and how we're going to communicate that.
Now, as you're planning for these next steps, is the plan to do the crawl, walk, run approach and do it as a staged, how we've done in the past? Or are you feeling confident enough that we wouldn't have to do it that way?
I think we still have to do some phasing in because and it depends on where we're at with community transmission. The lower the community transmission, then the quicker we can move. But as long as we're in a higher, right now we're still in the higher rated on both, as far as I know, on both measurements. So anytime we want to start in a higher level, we would want to take our time, start with a few, and then see how our mitigation continues to hold up under that type of community transmission.
Okay, thank you.
So, Dr. Carroll, are you thinking that when we start that, let's see, that would be a crawl first, would that be the younger grades as in elementary school and then work our way up?
There might be a mix of things depending on what we're dealing with attendance in the higher grades.
Okay.
But we're definitely, if we're going to relax a physical distancing, the science would indicate that younger grades would be a safer spot to do that with first.
Boy, you just rolled me right into my next question about if we're gonna forego the 6-foot social distancing, could you speak to the 3-foot social distancing that the American Academy of Pediatrics came up with? Seeing how they're non-political and they're doctors and they are pretty much the top of their profession, right?
Well, I don't feel qualified to, and I don't know how apolitical they are or not, but they are certainly pediatricians. I would say that last summer they originated this idea, and then when school systems started to shift and start to put weight into it, they backpedaled and didn't stand behind their original position. Now, they are now starting to reassert themselves, and there may be some science to back that up, and so we're taking a look at that now.
Good, thank you.
We have Chesapeake Public Schools are still adhering to 3 feet, are they not? Is it?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a model or a case example there that we can take a hard look at.
It is, and that, I think that's been part of the struggle across the state has been different health districts have been providing different expectations for what they, what they deem okay. So on this side of the water, on the peninsula, we heard loud and clear from our experts that they weren't gonna move away from that 6 feet for the last, 4 or 5 months. Where Chesapeake and on the south side, they moved to the 3 feet, many months ago. So that's something that we're continuing to work through. And again, I think with all the information and when you think about now we have a case for moving forward because of our mitigation strategies and how successful they've been to make the next steps in getting additional students in school. But as Dr. Carroll indicated, we certainly want to start with our younger students. Dr. Carroll has shared with cabinet and principals a lot of the science and a lot of the information around, Jim, it's the most prevalent to contract COVID. So the high school kids
Certainly.
are more at risk, obviously, than our 5, 6, and 7-year-olds.
And that's what we're seeing also,
Right.
like with the athletics.
Yeah, I think the tricky part for us in the midterm is the science has generally been right on judging the surges. So we have areas of the country that are opening up quickly, perhaps prematurely. So there's a call for another surge come May, June timeframe. And I think then what we have to weigh, obviously, through summer school and into the next fall is those things that we have to, from a mitigation standpoint, take on ourselves. For instance, contract tracing internally, perhaps testing, and I would encourage Dr. Carroll that we continue to look at perhaps in-school cost-prohibitive or cost-effective testing, particularly for the fall, depending, and that might be at the secondary school level. Those are things I think we consider in the longer term too as we move down this path.
Right. I could say as far as testing, there are some sources for that that are either cheap or free to us right now.
Good.
However, that has to be voluntary, and can we get enough volunteer participation to have sampling that would be worthwhile? And that's an open question right now, given some anecdotal information that we have.
And we may still find it unnecessary, but it's something certainly to weigh in the mid to longer term. Subfill rate is still progressing nicely?
It's very good. Last Wednesday
Good.
and Thursday and Friday were tainted by the fact that we had a good number of vaccinations. But on Wednesday it was 88%, which
Wow.
is
Yeah, that's great.
really good numbers.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really good progress.
I just have a comment. I think it was a great presentation, and it follows along just what we decided on back in July, that we would use the hybrid model and move on and adjust from there. And even today, we could turn around next week and put as many as we could back if things were to open up and the cloud were to open up right, and put more kids back to school 4 or 5 days a week. But it could be a slower progression too. But it's just because we made that decision that it's flexible, that's what it's called, flexible framework.
Right.
And I think you've done a good job covering everything, and thank you. You answered all my questions.
Thank you.
And certainly want the kids back just as much as everybody else too, so you're doing a great
Absolutely.
job. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board members? All right, thank you very much, Dr. Carroll.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll.
Our next presentation here is on the instructional update. Dr. Shandor, would you like to share some comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. And again, good evening, board members. So we've talked a lot about how our kids are doing. For the last several meetings, we've provided information to you around some information around social emotional and around how our kids are doing as far as grades and regression and those types of things. For the last several months, Ms. Skinner and her team and instruction and principals have worked extremely hard supporting our schools and supporting our teachers. So this evening, she has a great deal of data, and you'll see as you go through the slides, a great deal of data, and she's going to introduce who she's presenting with. So at this point, I'll turn it over to our Chief Instructional Officer, Candy Skinner.
Good evening, Chairman Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. Tonight, our team will provide you with an update on Quarter 2 and first semester student progress. Before we begin that, I would like to share some instructional highlights with you. Even though our students are currently in the hybrid model, our schools continue to participate in our yearly traditions, engaging our families, and celebrating our successes. The next few slides will highlight some of those activities and events. In February, we celebrated African American History Month. To help provide resources and content to teachers, the Department of Instruction developed the African American History Resource Center in Canvas. In addition, our schools designed special activities to acknowledge and celebrate the achievements and contributions made by African Americans throughout history. On February 18th, all of our elementary schools celebrated the 100th day of school. Students celebrated with special classroom activities, dressing up in character, and by reflecting on the things that they learned during those first 100 days. Our secondary schools continue to prepare our students for college and career. To help our students explore different careers, our job coaches have held career cafes where guest speakers come and share about their career field, and students can join via Teams. Our schools have welcomed over 75 guest speakers this year. This first picture up here that you see, it was taken from our engaged partner, NASA, who spoke to our students about internships and job opportunities one afternoon. In addition to this, we've conducted over 900 mock interviews with students as part of our Econ and Personal Finance course. Our schools have also been busy planning for student registration for next school year, and we found new ways to engage our students and families in that process. Since students were unable to attend in person, the faculty at Grafton High School created online course catalogs where each teacher recorded a short video that told a little bit about the class that they teach, and then the students could see and hear that teacher talk about those courses. And I got to review several of those, and they were very engaging. I think the students really enjoyed those. This last picture shows one of our students who is currently participating in Project Search. This is a year-long internship program for individuals with disabilities who have completed all coursework needed for graduation. In this program, students participate in 3 internship rotations while being mentored by an employee at that school host site. We also as you all know, we always celebrate Read Across America in a big way in our school division. And since we were unable to welcome guest readers into our schools this year, we invited them to record themselves in reading to our students. We have over 39 videos and 10 hours of recordings to date. Writer's Workshop is an important part of how we teach our youngest students to write. Our students engage in writing their own stories and take great joy in sharing their writings with others, like you see this student doing here. Our schools engage their families through parent universities, and we're continuing these events as well. Grafton Middle School hosts literacy nights for families and students every month, and then last month they held 2 focused on reading and writing strategies for their families. Schools are continuing to find ways to engage and recognize our students. This was our first year that all 4 of our middle schools participated in the Scripps Spelling Bee, and that's a picture of one of our winners there. All of our schools are continuing to recognize student accomplishments. Tab High School, pictured there in the top right, found a creative way to recognize students by moving their celebrations outside. Even with those given challenges, we were able to offer the science fair this year to our students. We had 49 students participate, and several of them have gone on to compete at the Tidewater Science Fair. And that last picture, I want to highlight the school administrative team at Tab Middle School. They challenged their students to improve their grades with a polar plunge. And as you can see, they were successful, so that admin team braved the water in order to keep their students motivated and excited. So now I'm going to move to the next part of our presentation, but before I do that, I do want to recognize the tremendous efforts of our teachers, administrators, and staff. These highlights are just a few examples how they are continuing to engage our students and families this year. So tonight's update is going to include reading and math progress data, student grades for quarter 2 and first semester, an update on the work we're doing to support social emotional learning. As I review this information, please keep in mind that while we report out on the academic year and marking periods, we are approaching the school year with the belief that learning is continuous, and we'll go to the very last day of school to make sure our students continue to learn. Now I'm going to ask Dr. Reitz, our Director of Elementary Instruction, to share some reading progress data. Before I do that, I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to publicly recognize my instructional team. They have provided strong leadership throughout this last year. I could not be more proud of the work that they've done to support our students and teachers. So now I'll turn this over to Dr. Reitz.
Thank you, Ms. Skinner. And for the next few slides, I'm going to talk to you about what is happening in our elementary schools, in particular to our reading progress. This slide shows ORR data, which is an oral reading record, and RPMS data, which is our reading progress monitoring system. And this is the regression data for students who are identified as below grade level in RPMS. I'm very excited to point out that the drop of regression from quarter 1 to quarter 2 in both of our instructional models. Based on the ORR and RPMS data in quarter 1, 16.25% of our students had regressed from quarter 2 last year. By the second quarter of this year, only 1.77% of our students in grades 1 through 5 are still showing regression. We feel very confident this decline is attributed to the following interventions. We are capitalizing on bringing students in on Wednesdays to provide intense one-on-one reading intervention. If mitigating measures allow, many schools are bringing students in based on the data an extra 2 days a week. This practice allows for students to have more exposure to the curriculum and benefit from multiple small group reading lessons. We are providing targeted, differentiated instruction with reading specialists, classroom teachers, and paraprofessionals. And our administrators and teachers are purposeful at looking at data on a daily basis to create and monitor student watch lists, our student success plans, and provide meaningful feedback to teachers and families. Each quarter, our elementary schools use a variety of data points to determine if students are considered to be above, on, or below grade level in the area of reading. This data includes our PALs, our oral reading records, developmental reading analysis, and performance on unit assessments for both flexible framework and our virtual models. For each of these assessments, we have an established benchmark level that we expect our students to reach at this point of the school year. The data that you see in this chart shows student performance for quarters 1 and 2 as compared to the past 2 school years. As you can see, 16% of our students are currently considered to be above grade level, which is an increase from the first quarter. 27.9% of our students are considered to be below grade level at this point. While this number shows an increase from last year, it is a decrease from the number of students who were below grade level in quarter 1, signifying that our students continue to make gains as they are in school receiving instruction and intervention from classroom teachers and specialists. As we move into quarter 3, we will continue to measure our progress against the previous school years and also closely monitor individual growth within our reading levels. All students in grades K to 2 take the PALS test, which is the Phonological Awareness Literacy Screening, in the fall and the spring. This screening provides a comprehensive assessment of a young reader's knowledge of important literacy fundamentals that help predict future reading success. As you can see from this slide, in every grade, the percent of students who fall below the PALS benchmark has gone up. However, we remain significantly below the state average. We do feel one of the reasons YCSD is outperforming the state is because we offered in-person learning to our students early in the fall, in turn providing small group and purposeful targeted instruction. So what is YCSD doing to help support those students who fall below the benchmark and are identified as at risk? According to state guidelines, school divisions are required to provide at least 2.5 hours a week of literacy intervention to any student who is labeled PALS identified. In addition to intervention from a reading specialist, services may also include additional group time from a teacher or paraprofessional, or in some cases, targeted by level and skill focus intervention on a literacy program such as RAS Kids. This slide we shared previously at a board meeting. However, we wanted to revisit it. It shows how our students in grades 3 through 8 performed on the measures of academic progress fall assessment and reading as compared to the national norm. As you can see in this chart, the division RIT score exceeds the national norm for reading in all grade levels. I'm going to turn it back over to Mrs. Skinner for her to share our math achievement data.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Reitz. So this slide does show our math performance, our student performance in math. As you may recall that in October, I shared that our school division adopted a new online assessment platform called Mastery Connect, and that's what the data you see here for quarter 2. This report shows the percent of students by grade level that have demonstrated mastery or near mastery of each taught math standard for this quarter. So these common math assessments allow us to monitor student performance across the division as well as curriculum pacing. So for example, in grade 3, if the semester data shows that our students need to, it actually did show that our students needed a little bit more time with computation, estimation, and patterns. And so what we did is we worked with our teachers and we provided additional time during quarter 2 for the students to do that. We took some of that quarter 2 content and we moved it over to quarter 3. But by being able to monitor this, this program, it shows us where we need to adjust our pacing. And so that's one of the benefits of this program. There's another benefit that comes to our teachers specifically. Because these are common math assessments, our teachers are able to see specifically what standards and how our students performed on those standards. So if I were a math teacher teaching 6th grade, and I look at standard 6.5, as I gave that assessment and I looked at the data, I could see specifically which students may not have mastered 6.5A, which is modeling multiplication and division of fractions. I can actually I can take those particular students and work directly with them, teach them, reteach them that specific standard, and then evaluate them again to make sure they've mastered it. So it's very specific. It helps the division with pacing, but it also helps the teacher identify quickly which students need intervention, not waiting, but doing that intervention as soon as possible. One thing you will notice on this data is grade 7. You will notice that the achievement for grade 7 is under 80%. We are monitoring that. We're giving additional supports to our teachers and our students through our math coordinator and our math coach at the division level. Our math coach is providing targeted instructional materials for each of those units at Math 7, and they're closely planning with those teachers as well. So now I'm going to transition over to a different type of data, which is student academic performance data. So this slide shows first and second grades performance for quarters 1 and 2. S is satisfactory, P is proficient, and N is needs improvement. As you can see from these highlighted boxes, student performance between the quarters has remained relatively consistent. So just again, we're looking at quarter 1 data compared to quarter 2 data for our students this school year. So the next slide will show that same data for quarter 2, but now we're going to look at it over the last 3 years. So how did our students do in quarter 2 over the last 2 years compared to this year? The percent of satisfactory grades has dipped slightly from last year and 4.5% from 2019. The percent of students with a grade of proficient has slightly increased over the past 3 years. And then finally, as a result of these changes, the percent of students earning a needs improvement has increased slightly. So now we're going to move over and we're going to look at student performance for grades 3 through 12 for quarters 1 and 2 because they have a different type of report card, so we're going to look at them a little bit differently. In quarters 1 and 2, grades for this year, you can see that the grade percentages have remained fairly consistent. And I'll take a pause so you can kind of look at that because that's a lot of data right there for you. The percent of incompletes, which are marked as an I, are higher for quarter 2. And as you may recall in my last update, we've encouraged our teachers, if they're not sure of a student's performance, they want a little bit more time to judge their mastery of the content, we encourage them to give an incomplete and give those students that time. So those incompletes that you see there are going to roll over to grades in the next few weeks. So now we're going to look at trend data across the last 3 school years like we did at the beginning with our grade 1 and 2. With the exception of incompletes, grade percentages have remained similar during these years. So this chart that we're looking at now shows trend data for second semester in grades 6 through 12. Before we were looking at quarterly data, now we're looking at semester data. Where we did not see differences in trend data for quarter 2, there are some differences in student performance for the semester grades. On a good note, we do see a higher percentage of A's this year. However, we also see a slight increase in the percentages of F's at the semester. Later in my presentation, I'll share a little bit about how we're supporting those students. So this last set of academic data that I'm going to share with you this evening looks at our students who are currently failing one or more courses. This is the same type of information I provided to you at the end of quarter one earlier in November. As you can see, approximately 10.75% of our students in grades 3 through 12 received one or more Fs second quarter, which is slightly less than first quarter. Additionally, this data shows that about 5.5% of our students have 2 or more Fs, and 1.8% are failing over 50% of their classes. So now we're going to look at that same data, but we're going to look over the trend data for the last 3 years. So this 3-year trend data for semester 2 shows similar student outcomes at all 3 levels. And then the final data that I'll share with you tonight shows semester trends over the last 3 years. As you can see, there is a higher percentage of students failing one or more classes this year as compared to the last 3 years. And we are continuing to support these students by providing remediation opportunities as well as credit recovery options. So that's a lot of data I just shared with you. But I felt like you needed to see how our students are doing from quarter to quarter, and then again for the last 3 school years, so you can do a comparison. Even though our students are in a completely different type of learning model, it's important to see how they did as compared to students that were in a traditional model for the last 2 years. So now I'm going to share a little bit of the actions we're taking to support our students. As I've shared before, our schools are continuing to monitor our student performance. Our administrators use Power BI daily to monitor grades and provide support. When we see a student who is struggling academically, schools reach out to those families quickly and offer support. Our school teams are continuing to develop and monitor student success plans to help our students who are struggling academically, who've become disengaged, or showing poor attendance. Our students are also offered additional support on Wednesdays, after school, and on their additional cohort days. And we are continuing to offer free tutoring to all of our middle and high school students in the evenings. And these are done by our own York County teachers. In November, when I first shared this with you, we had about 35 students participating. As of last Friday, that number's increased to over 200 students. And the number of reservations, so each student can make multiple reservations, has increased from 92 in November to almost 1,400. So we're very excited to see so many students taking and using that opportunity. We encourage our families. This is the flyer here, and our schools are sending that flyer out. There's a link, you just click on it, and you can make reservations for your students to work with a tutor in the evening. We're doing math and English. We're also doing study skills, which has been very helpful for I'm pleased to see how many students are actually signing up for study skills. So that's good. Getting back to this, our students who have failed that first semester or may have had a very low first semester average, we have worked with our secondary teachers to develop a process where they're offering some individualized plans and contracts for those students to work on making up that missed work, and in some cases having to do credit recovery. Our principals and instructional staff are continuing to monitor classrooms on a daily basis. They're going in, they're doing walkthroughs, they're doing observations, and then based on the information that we're seeing and what we're talking about here up at the school board office, we are providing just-in-time professional development. For example, on Wednesday this week, we have some professional development where we have some high school teachers who are going to share best practices for concurrent instruction, and all of our secondary teachers can join that and listen in. We found that to be very successful with our middle schools. Several weeks ago, I think we did that one. We've also done that with elementary teachers as well. So we're continuing to find that professional development need and trying to offer it as quickly as possible. So now I'm gonna turn it over to Katie Gaylord, and she is our coordinator of school counseling, and she's gonna share some work that we're doing around social emotional learning.
Thank you, Ms. Skinner. Good evening. To be proactive in supporting the social, emotional, and mental health student needs, our division is currently involved in the following preventative, wraparound, and reflective practices. Prevention services, as listed here for you, are the first step to ensuring students are equipped with the soft skills needed to navigate their environment, relate well with others, and achieve personal goals. During the summer of 2020, a Division SEL task force was comprised of teacher leaders, mental health professionals, administrators, and division-level leaders to develop an SEL framework for YCSD. The CASTLE model, consisting of 5 competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making, was used as the model guide to integrate meaningful social and emotional learning into our classrooms. These competencies listed to the right-hand side within the circles have been our SEL focus for this school year, leaning into this CASTLE framework as an evidence-based reference. A few examples of this work include elementary school counselors collaborating with classroom teachers to weave in SEL competencies for morning meeting and classroom instruction time. A mindfulness cohort for staff representing all school zones. Cohort members are actively participating in self-regulation techniques, mindfulness essentials, and the research-based Mindful Schools curriculum, which is really exciting, to then be available as SEL leads in our school communities for years to come. Our schools are finding ways to engage families. For example, the school counseling department at Grafton Bethel Elementary School created an SEL parent evening during Q2, with approximately 60 to 70 parents in attendance. The discussion included the benefits of SEL, a review of the 5 competencies, and resources for parents to utilize at home, to include books and breathing strategies. As a concurrent practice, classroom teachers, staff, mental health professionals, and administration are working closely to provide wraparound services for our students, with the goal for our scholars to feel interconnected and emotionally sound. Teachers are observing students in classrooms, staff are reaching out to families, and school counselors are offering small group and classroom support as needed to guarantee a wide net is cast. Let me help visualize what this looks like in our schools. At Tabb High School, school counselor Christy Shepard recently visited 9th grade classrooms virtually to offer mindfulness self-regulation strategies and emotional check-ins. And this SEL instruction was well received. The Queens Lake Middle School Counseling Department hosted new student socials, in person and virtual, for grade 6 and virtual for grades 7 and 8. Collecting valuable student information and providing a positive welcome for our newest students to YCSD as they transition into our community. By staying in tune with student needs, our teams offer these wraparound services fluidly. As you can see, our division has many preventative and wraparound services currently in place. In order to ensure there is consistency and ongoing progress monitoring, we also have several reflective practices that allow for ongoing communication, support, and adjustments as needed. The PBIS teams, led by Dr. Butler, which stands for Positive Behavior Intervention Support, 1 team per school, are meeting quarterly with our division-level team to review practices, introduce competency strategies and tools, and to track tier interventions. As coordinator of school counseling, I am actively participating on the SEL VDOE state work group as this team works to create and edit K-12 standards to be released this July 2021. Finally, the SEL task force, which again consists of classroom teachers, mental health professionals, administration, and division leadership, is now merging into an SEL mental health task force with the goal of looping in our community partners as this important work progresses this spring. More than ever before, this work needs to be at the forefront of our minds. Thank you for your continued focus on the importance of social and emotional learning in our division. And now Ms. Skinner will share instructional next steps.
transition over. Thank you, Katie.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
You can tell there's a lot of work being done in the area of social emotional learning. Very proud of that work that we're doing in all three of those areas. Okay, so the information that we've shared with you tonight is guiding our next steps. We plan for the fourth quarter of school, summer academy, and returning to school in the fall. To assist us with our planning, the Virginia Department of Education is currently developing a guidance document called Virginia Learns. This document will provide suggestions and strategies for schools to address learning losses and set priorities for spring, summer, and next fall. We look forward to that document from the state, but we're not waiting. We are actually well into the way of planning for Summer Academy right now. Our focus is going to be provide a variety of engaging options for our students at all grade levels this summer. Elementary and middle school students will have the opportunity to receive support in reading and math, while high school students will have the opportunity to work towards credit recovery, as well as earn original credit, which is what we offer to them every summer. We're also looking to offer some enrichment camps for our students as well. We're still working through the logistics of that for Summer Academy, and we will be communicating that out to families in the near future. In addition to Summer Academy, our schools are currently working with our students and families to address questions and concerns they might have about retention. So Dr. Wrights is leading that work with our schools. Over the summer, our team will continue to look at curriculum pacing concerns that may have emerged this year. We're going to work to ensure that those opportunities for our students are there so they can have remediation and recover any learning loss as we move into the next school year. And finally, our team is working on a plan to ensure a smooth transition for our kindergartners and our new students that are going to be coming to us this summer. Our team is in the process of reaching out to our military liaisons to discuss what specific needs our military students may have as they transition into our school division this summer. So now I'm going to transition. I'm going to move over to a different topic, SOL testing. I'm just going to give you some updates this evening. Some of this is really right hot off the press, literally last week. So there's been a lot of talk about whether the United States Department of Education is going to require states to administer federally required assessments this spring. And on February 22nd, that question was answered. They provided guidance to the state superintendents regarding federal accountability through a letter. And the guidance does state that federally required assessments will be administered. Knowing this first test administration will be challenging for states and school divisions, the U.S. Department of Ed has provided some considerations for us to think about for flexibility as we administer those assessments. And there's 3 of those, and they're listed here on the slide for you. But the first one is they're encouraging states to administer a shortened version of the statewide assessment. And for Virginia, that's already happened in many respects. A couple of years ago, we moved to our computer adapted testing, which is a shorter version of our math and reading test. So those have already taken place for Virginia, which is good news. They've also encouraged us to think about extending the window for the greatest extent practical. The state has extended the testing window for us and is also considering some additional flexibility. And you'll see in a few moments when I share our testing schedule with you, we have moved back our testing as far back into the calendar as we can to accommodate more time for instruction. And then also they're encouraging remote administration where feasible. VDOE is developing a remote assessment similar to the SOLs. So this next slide, I'm going to share a little bit about that. We just learned about this last week. And for right now, it's called the Virginia Remote Student Progress Test. Of course, that could change. And while we don't have many details, here's what I can share with you about that assessment. This testing option will be for students who have been fully remote this year and are unable to take the SOL test in person. It will be available for reading and math in grades 3 through 8 and for science in grades 5 through 8 because those are federally mandated tests. However, it will not be available for high school end of course SOL tests, of which are also federally mandated. So we will not have that option for high school. As I shared, we're just learning about this option, and once we have more information, we will send that information out to our families and update them. So what will SOL testing look like for our students in grades 3 through 8 this spring? Our students will begin in May, as they always have, and I shared earlier, we have pushed that testing window back 2 weeks to give more time for instruction. Though we do have some flexibility with the assessments being administered in the traditional format. The state has provided us, and we've always done local alternative assessments, but they've given us a few more areas where we can do those this year, and we are taking advantage of that. And that really is a flexible option where our teachers can do things that are non-traditional, like projects, performance tasks, writing, things like that, to show mastery of the content, and we can count that cumulative average as their proficiency, like they would for an SOL test. So this chart shows our planned testing schedule. All students in grades 3 through 8 will take both the reading and math SOL test, with grades 5 and 8 also taking the science SOL as they're federally mandated. We sent a letter out last Monday, March 1st, outlining this to parents, and so they should have that information. And then finally, our high school end of course SOL testing. All students in grade 11 will take the writing SOL test this month. It's coming up quickly. And starting mid-May, high school students who need a verified credit to graduate will complete their required SOL test in these courses. For the 2021 school year only, the state has provided some options for students who are enrolled in earth science. They're given the option to opt out of that earth science test and earn their verified credit when they take biology the following school year. And then students who need a verified credit in history are also given the option to defer that requirement to the next year if they're taking a history where they can take an SOL test. When that family letter that we sent out last week, we did ask parents to indicate their decision so that we will know how to plan for that. And it's a RICOR form that's due by the 24th of March. So we really encourage our families to complete that form so we kind of know how to plan for their students. So that really completes my presentation this evening. I know it's a lot of information. Hope I didn't go too fast through all of that. And I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have at this time, or if Dr. Wrights or Ms. Gaylord as well.
I'll go ahead and go first. I'm taking you back to slide number 9. Okay. It's
Wrights, can
about
you
the
pull that up?
at-risk identification.
Give them a chance to find that slide,
Okay.
the PAL slide.
Yeah.
Sir.
Way back at the beginning, of course. That, I understand that we're doing a lot better than the state, but it's troubling to me. Any child that's at risk is tough, and I'd like to bring them up to speed if at all possible. What happens when you have a student, say in elementary, that when they come to the school on their 2 days a week, their performance is like this? When they are remote, the other 2 days a week, it's like this. And it's because they don't have the support, or they're at a home that doesn't speak English. They can't get the support that they need. And I looked at the continued academic supports on slide 21, and I was wondering if we could add one to it.
Absolutely.
And if that would be that person, that little child that is here when they're in class and here when they're at home, could they come to school all 4 days that it's offered? Would that be possible?
So if it's a student who has chosen virtual instruction?
No, that's the hybrid.
Oh, the hybrid model.
Hybrid. They're in school 2 days a week and
Right.
they're fine then, and the other 2 days a week when they're doing remote, their performance is dropped.
Dr. Rice, do you want to talk about that and some of the things that we're doing for students who might be just exactly as Mr. Schaefer described?
Sure. So currently, right now, when our teachers come to our administrators and we look at that data and we realize that there might be an imbalance when the in-person versus the virtual hybrid model. So what we are currently doing in all 10 of our elementary schools is we are either bringing them in on that Wednesday for some more one-on-one intense, or if it's an EL student that would benefit from more days of the week with just simple exposure, we're bringing them in the 2 extra days. So they are actually coming in the 4 days a week. So we are taking the students that we feel that are more at risk currently right now and providing them if space allows. And currently right now, we have been able to support those situations where, just for example, one of the elementary schools, Magruder, they have several of their students coming in 4 days a week to get that extra support.
So that would be available to anyone that really needs it. I mean, of course, it's on an exception basis.
Yeah, I would weigh in, Mr. Shaver, that we're currently already doing that.
We
Right,
are,
at a
in
number
many
of our schools.
cases.
When I did tours just 2 weeks ago at Dare, there was a classroom of just those kids that you were talking
Okay.
about.
Good.
They had them in there where they had the support, they had the, whether it was a teacher assistant or whatever in there, guiding them through their lesson plan, because they needed that support, just like you were describing.
I got you.
It was great to see that working.
Thank you. Ms. Skinner, Dr. Wright, thank you.
I have multiple questions, but
Yeah.
shocker.
I thought I'd give it up.
So when you're talking about Mastery Connect, and I do like the program that we have this year. I think it's been a good year to have it start, just because I think it's be able to show us some things that we wouldn't normally see. But when you look at the percentage of remediation below 50%, would that normally correlate with your incompletes and your Fs? Or is this just based on when you're doing a lesson, for example?
Yes, when you look at Mastery Connect data, you're looking at mastery of a standard, not an overall grade.
Okay.
It's a little bit different. We're looking at what is the percent of students who have shown mastery on that standard of learning. So it's very specific. It's really meant for teaching. So I can give the assessment. I know clearly which students did not understand that standard, and I can then give them quick remediation.
So a teacher is going over a lesson, administering the Mastery Connect assessment, and that's not taking place of a test or a quiz or anything. That's in addition to that, so that they can know exactly where that is? Or are they sometimes using that as their...
They're using it as their test.
Oh,
a
okay,
test grade.
okay.
But then they can break it out and look at where, because the student may have gotten a B on that test, but may have been 1 or 2 standards that student didn't master.
Okay.
And we want to make sure that as our students progress through, even if they're showing like they're doing pretty well academically in that class, we want to make sure we can go in and look at what standards did that student not meet, group those students, bring in and do some remediation with them on those standards.
Right, and you said this is kind of one of the things that's in informing your pacing. Let's just say there's 25% of the information from Algebra 2 that they don't get to this year. How is that going to be adjusted for next year? Because it is a stepping class. It's not like when you're in 3rd grade and the information that we didn't necessarily get to in 3rd grade, we can try to change that into our 4th grade curriculum. How is that going to work with those classes as we get up into the secondary level?
Christy Pica, who is our math coordinator, has spent a considerable amount of time. She literally sits over this data all of the time, because that's exactly what she's making sure hopefully will not happen for our students. We've had a couple areas, and algebra and geometry have been our most challenging with pacing. As of right now, she feels like we are okay. We will continue to monitor those students. Bringing students in as much as possible will help us in that, in that course, in those courses. And we also have some other options that we can consider. But right now, where we feel that Christy feels like we are on track and we're going to be okay. We have the SOLs coming. Our students have to be prepared for that.
Correct. Well, I mean, again, I will say on camera that I'm very disappointed in the federal government and the state government for continuing to push the SOLs. I think if there were ever a year where it didn't need to happen, this would be the year. Just because I know from my own personal experience with my kids and the stress and anxiety that those SOLs caused, putting this on there, I understand it's not us at the local level. So again, I'm extremely frustrated that that's something that we're still having to worry about when we have so many other things, including mental health, that we're really trying to focus on and support our kids. So that's very frustrating. I know that you talked about retention a little bit, and in a normal year, that would be a huge discussion with admin, with the teacher, and everything. But is it gonna have to be just a different scenario? If I'm a parent of a 1st grader and through no fault of my own, we've done every single thing we can at home and every single thing we we could at the school, that will be a little bit more free or relaxed as far as retention is concerned, do you think?
And I know Dr. Rice probably wants to add into this,
Okay.
but I will say, and then I'll let him share a few words. We're approaching retention like we do always.
Okay.
We're using the same exact process. We are, if a parent or a teacher has concerns about retention, we are meeting, we go through three response intervention meetings with families. We're putting additional things in place, for example, bringing them in on Wednesdays, bringing them in on Thursdays and Fridays, or Monday, Tuesday, whatever their cohort might be, giving them additional time with a reading specialist. Then we're coming back together as a team to look at if that progress has helped them. And so that's the same process we use anytime with students that we're considering retention. We certainly know that this is a different year because of the amount of time students are in school. And we may have to consider summer academy for those students. And then as we move into the fall, we may have to look at a mixed model for some of these students. But we're committed to trying to keep them on pace and advancing to their next grade level because we have some supports in place to help them. Dr. Rice, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you did a good job just explaining it, and I think as time moves forward and we talk about Summer Academy and we're looking at the whole child whenever we're developing what Summer Academy is going to look like, those students are going to be at the forefront, the ones that actually struggled this year academically, and we want to make sure that they're the ones that are given that support through the Summer Academy program too, to get them through and into bridging this year into next.
And then my last question was about attendance. I know that we've had some kids who are not necessarily engaging, showing up and logging in. Can you walk me through that process from exactly what happens and who's intervening and at what time? Just so people at home know what's happening, and also just for the board to kind of understand. If I have a kid who's not logging in for 5 days in a row, what did it look like before, and has anything changed now that we're in COVID?
Sure, absolutely. We'll have Dr. Butler, our Director of School Administration, come up and take that one.
Thank you. Prior to COVID-19, because chronic absenteeism is one of the accreditation standards, we had worked in collaboration. So with our truancy officer, Mrs. Snow, had been working with Mrs. Beasley and with our ACCs and ACIs, so that if we do have students who are missing unexcused absences for more than 2 days, there's a direct phone call that's given from the school to find out what's going on. We were able to do that through our student connection coaches at the middle school and high school level. And then this year, we were able to add the attendance intervention specialists at the elementary school level. And so they work as a team. And so particularly now with COVID-19, they had to really change how they were working together. So if there's ever a student who misses without any documentation, so they miss their course for more than 2 times without a parent note, without a phone call, there's an immediate phone call from school staff to find out what's going on. When they hit 3, then there's a team approach. So our ACI and our attendance intervention specialists at the elementary school, they work together to find out what's going on. They do a school improvement plan with that student. Mrs. Skinner had shared earlier about student success plans. So they develop a plan to figure out what's going on. Is it an internet issue? Is it there's no support at home? Is there some type of SEL issue that's going on? So that if they do go to number 4, that's when there's a more formalized plan, so that when they hit 5, that's when our truancy officer gets involved. Because we're trying to prevent them from having to go to the court because of this. Because once a student has 7 unexcused absences, they have to be referred to court services with a CHINS. So we're trying to do all the interventions up front to prevent that from happening. Unfortunately, our truancy officer has had to take several students and families to court because of unexcused absences.
So you're saying it's still the same protocol that it normally would be, it's probably more intense now with more people reaching out when kids are there, just to make sure that, again, it's not a mental health issue or a family home life issue.
Right, yes, ma'am. Yeah, particularly because when they were face to face, you could put hands on kids and you can kind of find out. Now that with our students who chose to do remote learning, it's more important that we find out what's going on. So there's an immediate effort to try to find out what's going on so they can address the issue. Even our community resource coordinator, Mrs. Rousseau, she makes home visits along with the social workers, particularly if they've tried a couple of times on Teams or called. By the 3rd time, if they can't reach a student or a family, they actually go out to the home to find out what's going on. They actually go out to people's place of business where parents work to find out, is there something going on? Did you move? Different things to make sure that we're providing the right services for students.
Awesome, thank you so much, I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr.
And I
Butler.
will add that we also invite those students in. So I've been in
Okay.
many of the high schools where we have a student who's not logging on, They will set up a call with the families and invite those students in, where they'll be participating in the school. I've gotten to visit many high schools where, the student just needed to be in a place where they can get that work done. And once they came to school, they were very successful.
Right, and I mean, again, all of us have said that, kids being in person and having that teacher have eyes, just the teachers that are staring at that little screen with the 2 letters in it. Again, teachers are more than grade givers. You're actually noticing things that parents don't notice, and sometimes you're picking up on things that, kids, they're not sharing at home. So I'm glad we're wrapping around these kids. Thank you.
Quick
That was all
question,
mine. I
quick
think I'm
question,
good.
quick comment. Real quick on the, so we have academic support or the interventions, e-tutoring. I suspect e-tutoring the demand for e-tutoring will continue to increase over
We
the
hope it
coming
will.
months. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Are we resourced to do it? Are we leveraging subs to help us with this?
Actually, we are doing okay with
Okay.
our teachers. We have some teachers that are, they have open meetings, so basically they're doing quite a few of these in the evenings. They enjoy it. It's one-on-one with our students. We record these sessions so that students can go back and watch them again later. Parents can sit beside their student and do the session with their child so they can learn math as well if they want. And so right now we're okay as far as staffing goes, but certainly if we need to, we will. We
Okay.
really like the idea of it being our York County teachers because they know the curriculum, they know the students, and they know that child's teacher, so they can have personal conversations about that child's progress.
Gotcha, so we make the assumption we can manage it in the existing resources. A quick comment from Ms. Gaylord and the team. Yeah, again, greatly appreciate all the SEL support, how that's grown certainly from the last year, any engagement at the Virginia Department of Ed too in the working group. One quick comment though, we have a great deal of data that we wrap around instruction, but I'd like to see, and I know there's some constraints, but I'd like to see from an SEL standpoint, some baseline quantitative data that we could, because you did mention evidence-based, that we can leverage as we baseline the need for services, recommended services and outsourced services and those kinds of things that we can look at, again, as a board, and baseline from there, particularly as we go into next year. And I know there's some constraints on what we can share, but I'm sure there's some metrics that we can derive to present a more quantitative view from our standpoint. It helped me, certainly. I don't know the rest of the board members, but that'd be useful. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much for that update, Ms. Skinner. Our next update here is on the 2021-2022 school calendar. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Mr. Higginbotham. We're now going to bring back up Dr. Aaron Butler, Director of School Administration. He's going to share some information with you related to looking forward to the 21-22 school calendar. Dr. Butler?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor, thank you for this opportunity to present to you the 2021-2022 proposed school division calendar. Per the Code of Virginia, school divisions are required to develop school calendars with a minimum of 180 instructional days or 990 instructional hours. In addition, school divisions are required to ensure that there are 140 instructional hours per course for high school credit-bearing courses, 560 instructional hours in the 4 core classes at the middle school level, and 680 instructional hours in the 4 academic disciplines at the elementary school level. The calendar proposal I will be presenting tonight meets all requirements stipulated by the Code of Virginia. Per York County School Division practice, the Division Calendar Committee is comprised of various stakeholders from across the division. Since January, the committee has met several times to review considerations and options for the 2021-2022 calendar. Historically, the Regional Calendar Committee works to align inter-division calendars to minimize instructional disruption to students participating in the New Horizons career and technical programs and the Governor's School. This year, the work of the Regional Committee has been delayed due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Currently, there is not a regional calendar, but the committee is continuing to work to ensure that all divisions draft and begin the calendar adoption process so that it does not negatively impact student participation in the various programs. The calendar committee received several recommendations from stakeholders regarding priorities and factors to consider for the 2021-2022 calendar. Using Trigo Ed processes, the committee was able to establish and apply weight to several criteria. When the committee got together, you can see on the screen there were several items that came up. One was to maximize instructional opportunities to address COVID-19 learning slide. Staff was very concerned of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on how students were understanding curriculum, and so they thought it was important to make sure that whatever calendar was adopted, it did put in some opportunities to address this. In addition, they looked at the instructional alignment of students who were in advanced placement, IB, and special programs to make sure that consideration was given to those students as well. When we looked at those students who were taking SOL-based classes with end-of-year assessments, they wanted to make sure that we could front load and provide some additional time and opportunities for teachers to help students be prepared to take those assessments. Traditionally, as we've done in the past, families and students valued a 2-week winter break, and so they asked that we did prioritize that as well. And then if there was any way that we started prior to Labor Day, they wanted to make sure that we did end the school year earlier if there was a consideration to begin the calendar earlier than Labor Day. So using the Trigo Ed process, we looked at potential alternatives, we looked at risk, and we also looked at criteria points. And so the team was able to produce a pre-Labor Day calendar. However, we also wanted to present the traditional post-Labor Day calendar for the board to consider. Our next step is to seek parent and student and staff feedback, which will be a comment form that the division will be posting tonight through the York County School Division Digest. And we'll have this feedback window open for a period of time so that we will have some feedback so the board can vote on the March 22nd meeting. So I'll walk you through the calendar proposals. So for both a pre and post Labor Day calendar, on Monday, January 28, 2021, that is when our Summer Academy programs would begin. And then since Independence Day falls on a Sunday this coming year, that Monday would be the official day that schools and offices would be closed in observance of Independence Day. And then finally, on Thursday, July the 29th, 2021, that would be our tentative high school Summer Academy graduation. And of course, the program would also be ended by that time. So looking at a pre-Labor Day calendar, Thursday, August the 12th, would be when our new teachers would report to school. And then on Wednesday, August the 18th, that's when all teachers would report. And then Monday, August the 30th, would be the first day of school. Compared to a post-Labor Day calendar, new teachers would report back on Thursday, August the 19th, and then all staff would report on August the 25th. On the pre-Labor Day calendar, on Friday, September the 3rd, would be a student holiday teacher workday. In the new legislation, which allows school divisions to start before Labor Day, students must have a holiday on that Friday prior to Labor Day, and so that is the reason why that is given as a day. However, the hope is that when students come back for learning on that Monday and Tuesday, they would have a regular day of school. Then on that Wednesday, Thursday, staff will be able to conduct assessments, get information about where students are, so that on that work day they can engage in PLCs, they can engage in work sessions to plan out the rest of the year. And so that is the reason why that is a work day, to really take that data they get from those first couple of days of school on their students so they can have a game plan for the remainder of the year. And then on Monday, September the 6th, that would be Labor Day holiday, so that would be for staff and students, that would be a holiday. On our post-Labor Day calendar, it's traditional, and so students will not start their first day of school until Tuesday, September the 9th. September the 7th. In October on both calendars, there would be an early release day, and typically we do this before the interim report card so that staff can complete student assessments and complete their grading so they can have feedback for students on how they're doing so far in the quarter. And so on the pre-Labor Day, that would of course be October the 1st would be the early release day, with the 7th being the interim report card day. On the post-Labor Day calendar, that would be October the 8th, with the interim report card coming out on October the 14th. For the month of November, in the pre-Labor Day calendar, the Election Day holiday would be for students. Staff would work on that day, and that would entail parent-teacher conferences as well as being a work day. Veterans Day, which is something that had been requested in the past to be a student staff holiday, based on the constraints of the calendar, it would be an early release day for students, and then the rest of that day would be a teacher work day. And then for the Thanksgiving holiday, that would be a 3-day holiday, November the 24th through the 26th. And that is very similar to the post-Labor Day calendar. There is no difference in the two. For the month of December, there would be a 2-week winter break for students and for staff, and that would be December the 21st through December the 31st. We would have 2 work days for 12-month staff, which would be the 20th and the 21st. In January, students will return and schools will reopen on January the 3rd. The 17th would be the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, and that would be for students and staff, would be a holiday. We would have 2 early release days on January 27th and 28th, and then a student holiday, teacher work day, to prepare for the second semester on Monday, January the 31st. And that is the same on both calendars. For the month of February, very similar on both calendars. The 3rd marking period will begin on Tuesday, February the 1st on both calendars, and then President's Day will be observed on Monday the 21st, and that would be both a student and staff holiday. In March, there would also be another early release day for student assessment and instructional planning, and for the pre-Labor Day, that would happen on Friday the 11th. For the post-Labor Day, it would be on March the 4th. For pre-Labor Day calendar, we always have the first full week in April is observed as spring break. And so on a pre-Labor Day calendar, it would still be April the 4th through the 8th. And then also on a post-Labor Day calendar, it would be April the 4th through the 8th. And there would be an early release day on that Friday, April the 1st. And that's on both calendars. In May, there would be an early release day on May the 13th, and that would be on both calendars. And then the Memorial Day holiday would be observed on Monday the 30th. Finally, in June, for a pre-Labor Day calendar, there's a possibility of having graduation either on Saturday the 4th or on Saturday the 11th. And we would be ending earlier than traditionally because we would end the school year on June the 10th, which is a Friday, on the pre-Labor Day calendar. On the post-Labor Day calendar, the school year would end on Thursday, June the 16th, and then graduation would be on that Friday, June the 17th, which is the traditional day that we observe that. So when you compare the two calendars, the calendars are very similar. The only change again is that first day of school, which is to allow for some pre-assessments and teacher assessments prior to students coming back after Labor Day. That's one of the major changes. And then the other one is just when we end the school year, again, ending on June the 10th versus June the 16th. And so in summary, there will be 180 instructional days, 191 work days for returning teachers, and 194 work days for new teachers. In the event of inclement weather, we have built in a few days that we can repurpose. So our early release days, which are listed there, can be repurposed for additional hours, as well as in the second semester, there are several days that can be reverted back into full instructional days. Okay. And so thank you for this opportunity to present the calendar presentation. I am available for questions at this time.
I have a quick question. And this is something that there's been a lot of chatter about with the change in the state law. I know about a pre-Labor Day start since we're allowed to do it now. And even with the previous board, there's been some discussion about, whether we were going to do this or not. And I think we're to the point where we're exploring the possibility. I don't have an opinion either way at this point. But I would assume we're going to look for public comments or that sort of thing. How are we going to find out from our students and staff and our parents on what they would prefer?
Yes, sir. After this meeting, they are going to post the two models on the website for public comment, and then that'll be open for a number of days so that we can allow for comments.
Wonderful. Perfect. Thank you so much. That's the only question.
I believe it's open till March 17th. Is that correct, Ms. Goff?
Okay.
March 17th, that'll be open.
Be anxious to see the results of those comments and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Has there ever been discussion about switching Veterans Day for President's Day? Since I know that there has been a lot of push to have Veterans Day not be, actually have it be a straight holiday for student and staff and not President's Day?
That is right there.
Are we mandated by anyone to have certain days as holidays?
Well, the regional calendar would preclude us to try to do something like that, because the other divisions may have school and we would be out.
Okay.
That happens from time to time.
Yeah.
There are certain divisions who have, certain holidays off and some who have them on. A small number. I mean, we try to keep the major breaks like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and spring break all pretty similar. But there are some give and take, correct?
That's correct, yes. In the past, if you look back in, I think it's 2011 or so, we used to have Veterans Day, but they would change the way that we had our winter break as well. So sometimes you would have 7 days for winter break, and then you would have Veterans Day. And so it just really depends on how the calendar falls, and particularly how the regional calendar, how we try to align for New Horizons.
There's trade-offs anytime you're building a school calendar, there's trade-offs.
That's a good
with
question,
it.
though. Thank you
Well, I'm
for
just
bringing
thinking,
that up.
switching those 2 days, we're in such a high military area. If you were gonna switch 2 days, it seems those would be likely.
And if we do earlier, pre-Labor Day start, maybe if we do earlier than the week this year, maybe next year, I don't know.
Plenty of time.
Yeah, plenty of time.
Are we on, is the regional calendar committee on track from a timing standpoint? Are we pretty much on track? I know we're not solely dependent on the regional calendar. When I say on track, you don't see any delays in the regional calendar being published, do you, Dr. Miller?
So what we normally do, so we have started meeting back, meeting back in November. And so we have been working, and then because there's just been some different opinions about whether we're going to have a pre or a post Labor Day start, they've been turning it back over to school board. So just as we're having this discussion this evening, several other division school boards are also trying to make some decisions. We try to stay in touch with each other just to make sure that they know exactly where we are and what place we are, so that we are trying to minimize any type of disruption to learning for students, depending on how we put the calendar
Yeah,
together.
and I think it's also important to emphasize that the pre-Labor Day start is the recommendation from the calendar committee, correct?
From our calendar committee.
Yeah, be interested to learn what the feedback looks like
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
our families and students. Definitely.
And this isn't the first time that this has been brought up, because I just know, even
No.
not being on the school board, just being a parent, that this has been brought up multiple times, that this has been looked at for.
We've had a number of conversations about it throughout the years, and there's been a significant push, especially when you look at the map of the state of Virginia and how many on the western side of the state can go. Some school divisions go in a month earlier than we do. And again, when you think about some of your AP exams and your IB assessments, et cetera, I mean, those kids are already in school for a month where our kids aren't. So we've had a lot of conversations about that. And then the law changed, Aaron, what was it, 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
So it's given us that flexibility to go 14 days earlier, but it's 14 calendar days, not school days. My interest in this is completely focused on what's best for our kids, obviously. And for me, I've always been a believer and sort of pushing the message of we need to finish the first semester before Christmas break. Because that's something that, having kids come back for another 2 or 3 weeks after a 2-week break is tough. But we've been doing it for a long time, but I will tell you, in other states, there's a clean break. Teachers can go away not go away, but go on break for 2 weeks. Families can get away from it for 2 weeks, and they're not worrying about prepping for an exam or a big assignment that's due once they get back. So it really just depends on how we proceed. I think I like the recommendation from the committee. I think it's a good first step to get us a week earlier before Labor Day, but it also will give our teachers an opportunity to conduct all of those assessments, especially coming off of this year with the hybrid, flexible framework and virtual and those types of things, to really get in there and provide the teachers some time to sift through that data to prepare instruction that next week.
I think the earlier we're able to get that information, if we are going to start, pre-Labor Day, the earlier we can get that information out. The summer camps and things like that will adjust their schedules and things like that, and people can look at because I know that holiday weekend and that break is a popular time for people to go on some vacations, and they can start to plan around that if they so choose to go in that direction.
Right.
And I appreciate you guys doing the work to put together 2 calendars here, so we can look at both of those, and I look forward to seeing the public comments and then the discussion on it coming up.
Yeah, and I believe we have been coordinating with our Parks and Rec and a few other groups related to this calendar. So
Yes.
they're waiting for the decision as well once we move forward. We also know that I think there's 2 other school divisions on the peninsula that are considering very similar calendar pre-Labor Day.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much,
All
Dr.
right.
Butler, for the update on the calendar. Our next and final presentation tonight is on the operating budget. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Butler. We'll wait just a minute. So as you know, in York County, we always save the best for last. So we'll bring up the closer, and Mr. Bowen, our Chief Finance Officer, he is going to provide a lot of information related to our budget this evening. Mr. Bowen?
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Mr. Higginbotham, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. This evening, I'll provide an update to the superintendent's proposed budget for FY22. The General Assembly has completed its work on the state budget, and as a result, there are several changes that need to be incorporated in the budget that you'll approve on March 22nd. So real quickly, as a reminder, the superintendent's proposed budget that was presented in February included revenue and expenses of $155.5 million. With the General Assembly's actions, they added an additional $2.1 million, bringing the new total to $157.7 million. And this slide is just a summary of the General Assembly updates. So we had a minor reduction in adjustment to basic aid of $7,700. There was an addition to the standards of quality for student support positions. And this now requires school divisions to have 3 student support positions for every 1,000 students. So based on 13,000 students, which is a little more than what we currently have, but we were using round numbers here. That would require us to have 39 student support positions as defined by the language. And let me share with you the how that's defined. So student support positions include social workers, psychologists, nurses, licensed behavioral analysts, and assistant analysts, and other licensed health and behavioral positions. So in the final budget that we'll present to you on the 22nd, it will include 7 additional positions at a cost of $525,000. In addition, the General Assembly increased the age in which students with disabilities age out for services. Normally that occurs at age 22, but this has been extended or increased next year to age 23. And with that comes an additional $73,000. And the last item is the compensation. And I'm going to take a deep dive on the compensation here in just a minute. But if you recall, the governor's budget included a 2% bonus, and that bonus was funded over 10 months, so it was effective September 1. The General Assembly converted that to a 5% raise, and that funding now is available for 12 months. And that additional funding is almost $1.59 million. So to provide the compensation, 5% compensation at July 1, it's going to cost the school division $5.5 million. And what that means to the employees, so we have 3 different pay scales. So if we take the teachers first, the steps between the teacher scales are not exactly equal. So it averages from step 0 to step 30 at 1.5%. So each teacher will get 1 step on the scale, and then that will average 1.5%. And then the remainder will come in a cost of living adjustment at 3.5%. Now for the non-licensed, the steps between the scales are 1.75% distant between each step. And so they will get a step increase of 1.75% and then a cost of living at 3.25%. And then with the bus drivers and bus assistants, they are at 1.5% for each step, so they'll get 1 step and then the cost of living at 3.5%. And so in the superintendent's proposed budget, we did include a 2.5% salary increase at a cost of $2.7 million. So to provide the additional 2.5% would require an additional $2.7 million. The state is providing $1.59 million, which provides us a shortfall of $1.16 million. So when we looked at the shortfall, we're going to look in other areas of the budget to see if we can close this gap. And if you recall, When we presented the superintendent's budget, I talked a little bit about indirect costs. This is something that we added to the budget for this year, and that allows us to charge a rate to all of our federal grants to capture the administrative overhead it requires for the school division to carry out that federal program. I mentioned at the time that $200,000 that was included in the budget was a conservative estimate. So we went back and looked at our grants again, those that would be eligible for indirect cost, and we feel comfortable by adding another $200,000 to the budget, increasing that to $400,000 as a total. And so if we add the additional $200,000, then that creates a shortfall now for us for $960,000 if we provide the raise, the 5% raise at July 1. And we're talking about almost $1 million. That's a lot of money because what we would have to do is we would have to find other revenue, or we would have to reduce our costs in the budget to free up the money to provide that 5% raise on July 1. So we started looking at different strategies and different options. And one of those options was to provide the raise, split it up and provide 3% at July 1 and then 2% at December 1. And with that strategy, we end up saving $577,000. So the shortfalls decreased to $383,000. And then just here's the quick math on that. The additional state funding, the increase in indirect cost revenue, the savings from the option, and then the cost of the 2.5% raise brings us to a shortfall of about $383,000. Something to note with the 5% raise. I've been working in state and local government for almost 33 years. And I can't tell you the last time I saw where the state provided a 5% raise to its employees in 1 year. Now, they've done it over a biennium. But one thing I've known in my experience is that when the state provides the money, you want to do everything you can to capture that money. So we've looked at a number of different scenarios and strategies to try and capture that 5%, because while the economy is good today, we don't know what the economy is going to hold in a year from now. And so there may not be state funding for us next year to have another raise. So again, we were looking at specific strategies where we could reduce our cost, but then again, we would have to shift those costs elsewhere. And we went to health insurance. And we've talked a lot about health insurance, and we know this is a sensitive topic, particularly in a raise, because we didn't give a raise this year. We had to pull back from the raise. But with health insurance, we know this is a problem for us. We know that rates need to increase. And when we presented the superintendent's budget, it did include a slight increase to the insurance rates. What we looked at here was shifting some of the costs based on what was proposed in the superintendent's budget. And I'll provide those details a little later. But I just wanted to share that and make that distinction. But one of the strategies we looked at was shifting $50 of the employer cost that was increased to the employee. And in doing that strategy, we saved $406,000. And now the shortfall that we were looking at $383,000. So in using this strategy, we actually cover our shortfall, and we could provide the 5% raise based on the July 1 and December 1 dates. Now, if we go a little further and we shift it $75, that provides $609,000 for us. So it's a little more than what we need. And then we looked at, we looked at shifting $50 of the insurance costs from the employer to the employee, but not to exceed the average market for the region. And I'll explain that in just a little bit. But that provides us with some savings. It's not enough to cover the full cost of the shortfall. It's not enough to cover the shortfall, but there's other strategies that we can look at and consider, and if that's the option that we choose to use. And then we also looked at the worst case scenario, which is shifting the entire cost to the employee based on the average market for the region. Now, we know eventually we're probably going to have to be there, but I'm not sure that this is the way to go, but certainly we wanted to show the board and the community what that looks like if that option were considered. So this slide may look familiar to you. This is information that's been presented by Dr. Vladu in a presentation earlier this year. And what we're looking at here is just that it's the 2021 regional plan comparison, where we're comparing our current rates, the YCSD current rates for calendar year 21, to the regional average. And if you can see at each level, at the employee, employee plus child, plus spouse and family, our premiums are the lowest in the region. So we wanted to look a little further and say, what if we looked at one of the strategies? And this strategy that we're looking at here is it's shifting the premium of $50 from the employer to the employee, but we're not going to exceed the regional average in the market. And the one that really comes into play here is for the employee rate. So you'll see in a slide later on that if we move just $50 and we, from what our current rate is to, to what the proposed rate was in the superintendent's budget of $66, it would go up to $116. And so that would take us above the average for the employee only. So we wanted to back that out and then just show what it would be close to the regional average. So on this slide, we're looking at our current rate at 56, what was proposed in the superintendent's budget at 66, and then shifting $50 of the employer's cost to the employee, but not for the employee because we wanted to keep this below the regional average, if that makes sense. Okay. So in doing so, this provides us with a strategy that we feel comfortable that will allow us to capture the savings needed to provide the raise as I described in option 2. But as we talk about the rates, we're keeping our rates below the regional average, but you can't just look at rates because the other side of that coin is the plan design. And sometimes the plan design can have significant cost savings to the insurance, for the insurance coverage. So in this case, we're looking at the deductible, a plan deductible. So the regional average on plan deductibles is $394 for an individual and $788 for the family. And what that means is for the individual, the first $94 would come out of the employee's pocket before insurance would kick in. And if you look at our plans don't have a deductible. So the very first dollar is shared with the insurance and the employee. So while we do have the lowest rates, I would say we do have one of the, if not the richest plan in the region. So on this slide, we're looking at the current rates to what was proposed in the superintendent's budget. And here we have the Open Access Plan 1. This is our richest plan. We have 2 plans. We have the Open Access and we also have the high deductible plan. What we're proposing changing is only to the Open Access plan. The majority of our employees are enrolled in this plan, a total of 1,232. And you can see 485 at the employee level, 447 at the family level. And the current rate is $56 for calendar year 21. The superintendent's proposed budget included increasing that by $10. And then if you look at the next block, this is the employer rate for calendar year 21. The employer's paying $569. We were proposing that increased $657, and then the change in that would be an increase of $88. So you can see that even though we were increasing the rates, the employer was still picking up the majority of the cost increases. So again, going back to the strategies of shifting premiums, this strategy again showed shifting $50 at every level. And you can see here with the blue arrow what it did. It took the revised employee rate to $116, or for the market, it's $90. And then at the $75 again, it took that employee rate above the average. So while it does provide us with significant savings, we do need to protect the employee rate because that's really the rate that we want to provide the benefit for the employee. It's where we start adding children, spouse, and family is where you might want to consider increasing it more to the regional average, and certainly don't want to take the employee rate over the average, if you can help it. And then this is the strategy of including shifting $50 from the employer to the employee, not exceeding the market average. And again, savings of $308,000. Again, doesn't cover the cost of the shortfall, but what we're proposing to cover that shortfall, it's about $75,000 is what we'd still be short if we used this strategy and also implemented the option 2 with the raise July 1 and raise December 1, is we're proposing shifting a vacant FTE currently in the budget to one of those student support positions. And then doing so, that would free up one less student support position that we would have to budget at the $75,000 that I used. It's almost a wash. So we would be able to use that, just shift over an existing FTE that's been hard to fill, and we probably won't fill it. And then that will cover us with the student support positions. And then I would reduce that $525,000 that I have set aside currently, and that will be reduced by $75,000. So then this was the last strategy we looked at. This is moving all of the average costs for the region to the employee and then reducing our rates. Now, we showed this because this is probably where we'll end up in a couple of years. But this is not a strategy I would necessarily want to use, only because we're significantly reducing our rates. And we don't need to do that. We need to maintain to the greatest ability our current rates while increasing the employee rates to closer to the regional average. But if we did that strategy, it would save us $1.3 million. And the other thing to note, this is really the only strategy that gets us to a 5% raise on July 1. All of the other strategies that we've looked, because that was a $960,000 shortfall, none of the other strategies came close to that $960,000. And so that includes my update for this evening. I'll be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I'll just make sure that I understand this correctly. The state is, recommending that 5% compensation increase, which is equivalent of $5.5 million for York County, but the state is only providing that $1.59 million for that compensation increase?
Well, they provided $835,000 in the governor's budget.
Okay.
And now they're providing an additional 1.5 to convert that bonus into the raise. So total, it's close to $2.4 million. And so to provide the raise, it cost us $5.5 million. So the school division's having to come up with $3.1 million, and that's about 56% of the total raise.
Okay.
And that's what really makes it a challenge for all school divisions, is to provide that.
So can you explain about standards of quality positions that we have? And I think that's what the state is funding, is that correct?
That is correct. What they're funding us is on the funded, York County funded SOQ instructional and support positions. And just to give you some idea of what that is. So currently for FY21, we have 1,875 FTEs in the budget. What the state's going to fund us is on 1,140 of those positions. And when they fund us on those positions, they apply the local composite index. So they take the prevailing salary for, say, for teachers. And it might be less than what our average salary is for teachers, but it's what the state's prevailing salary is. And if it's $55,000 and our average salary might be $58,000, they'll use the $55,000. And then they'll take the local composite index. So for York County, it's about 38%. So that means of that $58,000 that the state's going to fund us, we pay 38% of the cost, and the state pays 62% of the cost. So even when they fund just on the SOQ positions, we still have to come up with our share of that raise. And then there's about 735 positions in which they don't provide any funding for, and in that case, we have to provide 100% of the raise.
Trying to do a comparison here, because I did have another question. Shifting the additional premium of the $50 to the employee, for example, where an employee would pay $116 versus average market rates, the employee would pay $90. Slide 8 and slide 6.
Yeah, I believe our recommendation is 85 under that
85,
scenario.
okay.
Yeah. We, again, Bill, if you want to click back to
And
those
it
slides.
basically just adjusts based on if it's employee child, employee spouse, employee family.
Correct. So we adjusted the employee, child, employee, spouse, and family
Okay.
to $50 above the superintendent's proposed budget that I put out there.
And if we did that one, that would fully fund the 5% right on July 1. But if we did the other one, the $50 not to exceed average market would basically
Be December.
allow us to where we could do part of it in July and the rest of it December
So,
1.
yeah, so the $50 adjustments to those three categories that I just mentioned, and keeping the employee at $85, we can move forward with a 3% and a 2%, as Mr. Bowen indicated.
Okay.
Only in the very last scenario, when you put all of the, go up to the regional rate for all of them, so I think the family bill, Mr. Bowen, was $696 for the family plan, which was a difference of 300 and some dollars.
31.
That, we wanted to show that as the, not necessarily the worst-case scenario, but
Right.
worst-case scenario, so to
Right.
If
speak.
we were at the market average. yeah.
Correct, and I think one thing that we really, in the board needs to consider as we move forward is, we have a responsibility to our employees as we're giving these compensation increases to help them in retirement and VRS. So I think that's something that makes a major impact on the decisions moving forward, that we have to try to, we've tried to balance the health insurance, and for the last decade or so, we've reached a point where we're unable to do that, given our balance in the reserve fund. So moving forward, we have to pass some of that on to our employees, obviously. But we really need to make sure that if we have an opportunity to give our employees raises, that we do. That we absolutely do, because that's going to carry them, long after they leave the school division in retirement.
So I don't have this on the slide, but I will say that the worst-case scenario for an employee at the proposed $50 with not to exceed, the family rate would increase $707 for the year. So we look at it just for a teacher. The average teacher salary is about $2,670. And so it's about 26% of that raise would go to the increase in the insurance. So they would still get more than a 2.5% raise, because the 2.5% raise would provide them somewhere around $1,300 on average for the teacher.
In the first 5 months, the 3%, they won't feel that.
Right. What we didn't show is a blended rate. So what the employee will actually be paying is 5 months at the current rate of $56, and then they'll be paying 7 months at $85. So it's actually, when you look at it over the fiscal year, it's blended and it's less than the actual $85.
And what's your recommendation from the division? We're going to mull over, I'm sure, these numbers you have, but I'm just curious what your recommendation is, or do you have one yet? Or are you going to wait till the next meeting?
No, we have a recommendation. Our recommendation would be to move forward with that third bullet, shift 50% of the insurance cost to the employee, and making sure we not exceed the market.
$50, not 50%.
What did I say?
50%.
I'm sorry. Yes, $50. Either my glasses are fogging up, or.
Just want to clarify that.
Yes,
And you feel confident you can make up that 75,000 switching an FTE to?
Yes, yes. We actually have a number of FTEs that go unfilled every year. We try to hire those positions, but we just can't find the people. So we will just shift that over and to cover one of those student support positions.
And what percentage of our employees utilize this insurance? I know you told us the
So,
numbers.
yeah, so I think it's 1,232, so there's about 500 employees that do not utilize our health insurance.
And with the cost of insurance, as we've seen the cost increase, it's limited our ability to be able to do things like salary increases. And so for those 500 employees that don't take our insurance, they end up losing out in that strategy.
And we are out to bid, correct?
Yeah, so there are a couple strategies we're looking at right now in hopes to mitigate the future increases, so that it'll take us a little bit longer to have to get to that regional market average. So one of the things we're doing is we've gone back out to bid. Our interviews begin this week, and we should have a decision for the board or a presentation for the board sometime in April. The other thing we're looking to do is in this bid process is to add a third plan to our menu of 2. And with that plan, we will have something that's kind of middle of the road where we'll propose having a plan deductible and with the premium slightly lower than what we're seeing here today. And again, adding a plan deductible can save, depending on what it is, if it's structured at 500 and 1,000 or 250 and 500, those amounts would depend on the savings that you would generate. But a $500 to $1,000 deductible could save as much as 8% to the plan, and that's significant.
And I think you showed us the slide before, but in the area, I believe York County is the only school division without a deductible currently, correct?
Right, that's correct. To the premium plan.
Okay.
So most school divisions have the high deductible plan, very low premiums, but it's more managed care by the employee. But when we did our comparison, we took the best plan of each school division in the region, and we compared our best plan to their best plan. And so that's what the presentation was.
Yeah, and it's also important to note that that slide that had the regional comparisons, that's from this current year's rates, not anything that would change for FY22.
So we're comparing our FY22 rates to the region's FY21 rates because we don't know what their rates are going to be next year. So while we're still below the FY21, our 22s are below the 21s, their rates, most of those rates will increase for our competitors.
And I think in everything you've showed us, I mean, our plan is still extremely robust as compared to, you know, the region anyway.
There's almost no comparison, yeah,
Yeah.
with
Really.
regard to out-of-pocket max and those dynamics, absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the update,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Bowen.
Mr. Bowen.
Thank you very much.
That was our last presentation on our agenda. I appreciate all of the information presented this evening and the work reflected in providing all of these updates. Our next regular meeting will be Monday, March 22nd at 7 p.m. right here in the boardroom. This work session is adjourned, and I would like to now call to order the March